Hi everyone. I'm Mateo, and I like to draw. I wouldn't normally be doing this, but my sister Izzy has challenged me to share my art, or something. Anyway, in these videos, I will show you how I draw some stuff, and hopefully it will inspire you to do the same. You can draw along if you feel like it, so get a pencil out, or something. This is Draw with Mateo. We're going to draw the Night Hunter today, but only because he's a good example of how to use light in a drawing. Otherwise, I would have picked someone else, like one of those mushroom dream creatures from the fantasy realm. Anyways, let's get started with a basic shape that we can use as a guide. We'll draw the Night Hunter inside of this flat-top triangle-looking thing, and it'll help us make sure all our shapes and sizes are correct. We can draw the hat first with a couple more basic shapes. He has sort of a headband with an eye on it. Creepy. And the brim of his hat comes down diagonally from his head. He probably thinks he looks like a cool cowboy, but I doubt that's how Coop saw him when he was being locked in a Grim Keeper's cage. Sorry, there's just a lot of bad history here. When I sketch out a hat, I always try to make sure that the head I draw looks like it would fit inside. My art teacher showed me this trick, where you follow the edges of the hat downwards and use that as the width of the head. The Night Hunter always wears a bandana over his mouth, like he doesn't want to reveal his face. So let's go ahead and sketch that out. I wonder who he really is. He is definitely not just another nightmare creature. There's more to him, that's for sure. Anyway, his body kind of comes down like this, but his cloak distorts his shape a little bit. So we'll draw one side of the cloak coming across his body towards where his feet will be. And then we'll do something similar for the other side. I'd say his waist would be right around here. And we can begin to sketch out his legs. I used to have trouble drawing shoes, but I discovered this cool trick. If you make a little square and put it on top of another square, then add another square going backwards, it gives you the basic 3D foot shape. I can't tell you how many erasers I burned through before I figured that one out. Izzy got mad at me because the eraser shavings were all over our room, even in her pillow. But that's nothing compared to my dad. Somehow they got into his morning coffee without him noticing, and he actually drank it. Like, the entire thing. Let's just say we were all relieved when I finally learned how to draw shoes. So, the legs look pretty good, I think. Just make sure to draw lightly for now. We'll go back later and make things a bit darker. For his arms, I usually use some rectangle shapes at first. Maybe we'll put them at an angle because he's always ready for a fight. And we'll add his hook. I don't know why he has that. Makes him look scary, I guess. We'll do something similar for his other arm. We can use a basic circle to represent his hand for now. He always has his crossbow on him, so we should probably add that in. That same sort of eye that is on his hat is also on his bow. Weird. We can map out the body of the bow a little bit, and then add in the string, which runs from the tips of the bow back to the handle. Come to think of it, I think I've seen him dreamcraft his crossbow. I wonder, he really has a way of messing with things, and those bolts of his corrupt anything they hit. It isn't pretty. Okay, I'd say we've covered all the basics with the Night Hunter. I think we can fill in some details now. He has a notch in the brim of his hat, and we can show a little bit of thickness there as well. We can start drawing with darker lines now, since the rough sketch is done. Let's outline the eye and add in the pupil. It looks pretty creepy. One thing I've noticed when drawing evil characters in my comic books is that diagonal lines make them look even scarier. So we'll bring his hat upwards and make some triangle-type shapes. He has a couple of laces where his hat is torn, so let's add that in as well. I guess the Nightmare King doesn't pay well enough for him to buy a new hat. There are a couple of jagged pieces of his hat that stick out from the back, so we'll shade those in to make them feel farther away. I think I'll shade in the headband as well, to separate it from the rest of the hat a little bit. The hat always casts a shadow on his face, so we should shade that in. Sometimes when I draw something in shadow, I use a little bit less detail, because things that are in darkness are usually harder to see. I've decided which part of the bandana will be in shadow, and I've shaded it in. Now, I'll add some details, like folds in the bandana's fabric. I guess the whole bandana itself is pretty dark, so maybe we'll shade the rest of it in a little bit, and then go back and make the shadowed part even darker. You've probably figured it out by now, but basically anywhere that it feels like the light would be blocked, we'll put in some shadow, like on the inside of his cloak a little bit. He has an upper piece to his cloak, with another rip that has been stitched up. And right here is another place where the light is somewhat blocked. We can do the same on the other side. Let's define his arm a little bit more. And then figure out where his front meets his side. We'll shade that area in because it's being cast in a shadow by the rest of his body. Then we'll shade in his arm and some more of the right side of his body. We've kind of established at this point that the light source is on the left side, just going by where we've placed the shadows. His forearm comes out a little bit from his body, so maybe there's a little more light on it than his shoulder. The bottom corner of his cloak is going to be really dark because it's the furthest from the light. We can draw his hook in too, and add a shadow from the cuff of his cloak. Kinda like I said earlier, his cloak is blocking a little bit of light from hitting his chest, so we can add some shadow in. I'm gonna go back over the line of the cloak so that it's clear where it ends and the shadow begins. Let's define his shoes a little better. He's got some metal plates in the toe that we can draw in. The shoe on the right, though, is pointing away from the light, so I think we can just shade that in and not draw all of the little details. His leg would be in shadow a little bit as well. Even the right-hand man of the Nightmare King needs a belt to hold up his pants. And he's got a little chain that comes down and attaches to a buckle around his leg. Luckily, we don't have to worry about getting the details too perfect. It seems like just indicating that the details are there will usually make our drawings feel more real. The Night Hunter has some arrows on his shirt that we can roughly sketch in. His left arm is in the light, but the underside of it isn't. So we can draw a line separating the underside and shade it in a bit darker. I think it's time to add the details to his crossbow. I'm gonna start with the eye and work my way down the handle. His hand would wrap around just like that. The body of the bow is almost just a basic rectangle, and we'll add in the side of it so it looks more 3D. Since the light source is on the left, anything on the right would probably be in shadow. The front of the bow comes down and around like that. And the other side. Let's try that again. There are little spikes coming off the front. And we can retrace the bowstring so we can see it better. Back to his cloak. He has a chain that comes across both sides. It's basically like a circle and a line, then another circle and a line as the links come together. Overall, his clothes are pretty dark, so we can shade them in a little bit. Not as much as the shadowy areas, though. we should get his hat too, both on the bottom and the top. And maybe a little something on his crossbow. Behind his feet, I think we should put a little jagged line to ground him. I think it's called the ground plane. We can add in some grass too. And finally, we can put some shadow. Man, I've said shadow a lot in this video. On the ground where he's standing. And there you go. That's the Night Hunter. You'll be lucky if this is the closest you ever get to meeting him. He's definitely not someone you want to grab a snack with in the candy realm. And I'm sure Zoe would agree with me. She hates him with a passion. Well, I hope you liked that, or at least felt just a little inspired to try it out yourself. Izzy has told me to say this. Your art doesn't need to be perfect, just as long as you have fun doing it and you like it yourself. Join me in another video for another drawing. There, Izzy! I did it! Are you happy now?